What if I told you some of the greatest singers in history, the ones who filled opera houses without microphones, never thought about their diaphragm or their support or doing sit-ups for breath control? They sang with ease. And today we're going to learn exactly how they did it. Now, just as a recap, the last couple videos we've been dissecting James Anderson's We Sang Better. And I still think it's important for you to purchase this if you're interested. It's not the cheapest book in the world, but I still think it's important for you as a viewer to purchase this and read it yourself, because I'm not going into the deep nitty-gritty that James has his own comments on, because you need to buy this book and you need to read it, and also I'm not trying to get sued. With Sybil Sanderson. Sybil was an American soprano from San Francisco. She actually became one of Massenet's favorites. She recalled a teacher who made his students lie on the floor, stack volumes of encyclopedias on their stomach, and then, unbelievably, sit on them. The students screamed in pain, and the teacher proudly declared, "See, you do have a B flat. The only question is how to get it out." Sanderson rightly mocked this teacher, saying that it was a form of athletic torture. She knew that singing wasn't about maintaining muscle mass. It was about singing naturally. As Anderson says, Anderson from the book, the older way of singing was not based on overdeveloping a set of muscles. The good singers kept nearer to nature and concentrated on their singing rather than athletics. So next comes Gaetano Nava, who is a professor of singing at the Milan Conservatory from the golden era of singing, so that would be the early 1800s, late to late 1800s. Among his students were some of the great baritones that we know today, such as Sir Charles Santley, for whom Gounod wrote an aria for in his opera Faust. Santley wrote, "Keep the mouth open so that the upper teeth are immediately over the lower, without the least discomfort, almost smiling. The position should preserve natural fitness and grace." He warned students to avoid wrinklings of the forehead, contortions of the eyes, twistings of the neck, and all faults and tricks offensive to the spectators and inimical to the perfection of singing. So if you see any people who have the tension of singing with their eyebrows raised, who sing like this, who squint, who open their eyes really big, I used to do that, who, do this or any sort of grimace, that's proof that whatever the singer is doing is not working, and they're trying to use other parts of their body to get the sound out that they want. The next person we meet is Louis Leblanche, the famous bass who sang at Beethoven's funeral. He also wrote his own text of singing, which you should read. It's called The Complete Method of Singing. Leblanche and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, so I'm sorry if it's wrong, but Leblanche agreed that with Nava about the natural grace, but gave a little bit more freedom to how to approach singing. He said the mouth should be smiling, but without a grimace, right? So just a little lift. I like to call it a little lift. Open enough to admit the end of the forefinger between the lips, right? So this is the end of the forefinger. That's as much as you need, which is crazy. The jaws need not remain perpendicular, but in whatever position is most natural to the pupil's conformation. So this is going to get into a later point in a later video we're going to talk about, which has to do with vowels. But we'll talk about that. But this also goes hand in hand with Lily Lehman, who we have been talking about the last couple videos, and if you haven't watched those yet, you need to watch those before we're coming to this. But he then later says that most importantly, the tongue should be free and suspended, occupying the smallest possible space in the mouth. So we're going to try that right now. So we're going to try singing something with our mouth totally open, like overly open to the point of like almost overextension of the jaw. And then we're going to try what he says, which is to sing with a little smile and the 4 fingers width of space between the teeth or the mouth. So let's try. It's fine, but it feels like it's getting a little lost. So let's try it this way. I think that one had a little bit more ping and a little bit more resonance. But again, take everything you read with a grain of salt if you'd like, and try it. And if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. Everybody's different. The next part is like, how do we avoid grimacing and making stupid faces when we sing? So the most important thing that I was ever exposed to as a young singer was the mirror, which when I was 13, I did not want to look at myself in a mirror for an hour. I didn't, but my teacher, Ashlyn, love you if you're watching this, made me. And I think it really set me apart from other singers because I was able to watch any sort of conformities that I was doing with not only my face, but also my mouth and my tongue. And so this has been recommended by many different singers, such as Sims Reeves, who we've talked about before. And he said all affections in the formation of the mouth should be avoided, and singers should once a day practice before a mirror to correct faults from the defective breathing or grimace. So practicing in front of a mirror will allow you to immediately see any sort of negative tendencies that you're starting to do while you're singing, and you can correct them in the moment. That's the most important thing. On top of, a lot of people are like, well, I can't afford a teacher. You have a mirror, and you have the wonderful technology of recording. Be your own teacher. Catch yourself doing weird things. Try to be as natural and neutral as possible. Okay, this is kind of going into the next idea that everything should be done with ease. Alice Merriam, a promising American soprano from, again, the golden age of singing. She studied in Europe with Rezsky, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Rezsky, I think. But those studies nearly destroyed her voice, and here's why. Rezsky, once a brilliant singer himself, had become obsessed with this new scientific theories of singing, especially about the diaphragm. I hate that shit. By the time Miriam met the teacher Georges Cunelli, her voice was in crisis. Cunelli described hearing her sing Un bel dì from Madame Butterfly for the first time. And this is what he said about it. It ended with a series of railway engine whistles. She looked like a boiled lobster suffering from scarlet fever. If somebody wrote that about me after watching me sing, I would be so destroyed. Okay, so she went to a doctor afterwards, and the doctor found her larynx congested, her vocal cords inflamed, and her breathing overdeveloped. She could inhale enormous amounts of air, but only sing a tone for 8 seconds. Sounds a little bit like me like 5 years ago. Cunelli concluded it was typical case of vocal disorder caused by pushing and forcing. So this is the reason why sometimes the approach of scientific singing can get you into trouble. It's not technically wrong, but when you start thinking about singing as something more than a natural ability, it gets way too complicated and you end up looking like a stuffed lobster who's suffering from scarlet fever. Jesus Christ, it's a horrible thing to say. So the diaphragm debate. Okay, let's get into this. So the queen herself, Adelina Patti, who we had talked about in the last video. In 1922, a story was told about Patti visiting a singing studio in Paris. A student trembling with effort finished his aria after being lectured about using the diaphragm. Patti turned to the teacher and asked with disarming honesty, "Well, what is the diaphragm? I never heard of it during my career." And she wasn't joking. The great singers of her era simply did not talk about the diaphragm. They didn't talk about it at all. It was only when scientists entered the scene in the 1850s that diaphragmitis spread throughout the singing world. Soon everyone was talking about the muscle and pushing and expansion. And as Anderson Riley puts it, some newer singers boasted they could move their grand piano with their diaphragm. That's terrifying. Don't do that. When asked if Caruso did this, his doctor and friend replied that Caruso actually criticized teachers who overbuilt diaphragmatic strength. Patti, by contrast, stayed effortless. Even as a child, she could sing an entire Bellini aria while hiding under a bed during a game of hide and seek. That's the definition of ease. So here's what the masters all agreed on. Singing should feel easy. The body should remain free and natural. Don't train muscles, train music. And don't use the diaphragm. Let the breath be natural and happen as if you were just speaking, like we talked about in our last video. The secrets to singing better is singing easier. The secrets to singing better is singing easier. One more time. A little bit of ASMR. The secret to singing better is singing easier. Let me know if you think I should do ASMR. Or, as James Anderson reminds us, we sang better because we sang with ease. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below in the comments. I tend to answer most of them. But until then, I will see you next time.